India and the Philippines are friends by choice and partners by destiny. From the Indian Ocean to the Pacific, we are united by shared values. Our is not just a friendship of the past, it is a promise to the future.
We welcome our new strategic partner, India, then a crown jewel for an empire, and now the key to unlock a free and open Indo-Pacific. As two of Asia's biggest democracies with a deep historical linkage, the Philippines and India should transform our natural friendship into a robust and modern partnership.
Today was the final day of Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s historic 5-day visit to New Delhi, a natural friend to Manila and partner. But what exactly makes the Indian-Philippine strategic partnership so different? And why does China see this as such a threat? Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Yin Khvat. Joining us today are Renato Cruz de Castro, Moffat Taiwan Fellow at National Zhengzhou University and De La Salle University Department of International Studies, Distinguished Professor. Also, Sana Hashmi, Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation Fellow and former India Ministry of External Affairs Consultant with Southern Division. And finally, we have Roger Liu, National Sun Yat-sen University International Masters Program in Asia-Pacific Affairs Assistant Professor. Welcome back to the show, Renato, Sana and Roger. In an exclusive interview with India's First Post's Palki Sharma, President Marcos was asked what plans Philippines had to purchase Indian arms. Watch.
Let me be clear, though. We are not girding up for war. We are simply reacting to the challenges that we are facing. Equally importantly is the exercises that we do together, the cross-training that we do together. When I left Manila a couple of days ago, 4 Indian vessels were actually in the South China Sea. I've spoken to the officers and men who operate the Brahmos system, and they say we need more. We are in the process of actually procuring more.
Well, so you heard the President confirming reports that the Philippines is in the process of buying more Brahmos. What has the Brahmos missile system come to represent or symbolize between India and the Philippines from the Philippine side?
Well, when we decided to acquire the Brahmos around 2018 to 2022, it was primarily seen in terms of boosting our capabilities, given the fact that we have a Navy. But right now, it has greater significance because we have adopted, as President Marcos mentioned in his speech, the comprehensive archipelagic defense concept, meaning we have to defend the entire archipelago. A component of that, of course, is building up our maritime capabilities, but we can only do so much. That budding, evolving maritime capability had to be supported by what we call a land-based anti-access area denial capabilities, where, of course, our Army, our Marines would have the capability to conduct maritime interdiction, along, of course, with the deployment of the U.S. Army Typhoon and the United States Marine Corps Nemesis.
How symbolic was that, the two countries coming together? The first time a Philippine president has gone to India in 7 years. Was it symbolic, or actually was it more than that?
It's symbolic, and of course there's also an element of substance. The development of what President Marcos mentioned, we have, of course, our alliance with the United States, but we're also relying on other countries in terms of strategic partnerships. So President Marcos said we now have 5 strategic partners. That's Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, and of course India and Australia. But if you look at the 5, actually India is the most powerful. You know, Japan, of course, has a powerful conventional military capability, but it simply doesn't have nuclear weapons, and of course it simply doesn't have that in terms of the population, and of course India's growing industrial base. So this is very significant because we are relying on an emergent Indo-Pacific power. Not just on the United States, but of course on the other side of the Indo-Pacific, and that is, of course, an emergent and highly confident India.
Sana, how about for India? What do those, in particular the Brahmos purchases and also the Navy drills for the first time, what do they symbolize for India?
In my view, I think, as in I would agree with Renato that, of course, every visit is symbolic. But I would quote President Marcos that it was remarkably productive. And, when it comes to the Philippines, India is not really neutral. India is generally neutral when it comes to other conflicts, but then India has explicitly endorsed the ruling in favor of the Philippines. So I think this also tells us that how India views the Philippines. So India, and even within the context of the Act East policy, Philippines is a very important country. So the visit that happened after 7 years was very important from the perspective of both India and the Philippines. But if we talk about the Brahmos, I think, of course, there are a number of factors. First is that India is trying to step up its military presence in the Southeast Asian region. And as President Marcos said, it's not about starting the war. It's about defending our sovereignty. It's about defending the water. And also just to improve the interoperability among partners. And I think throughout his speeches across all platforms, one thing he mentioned that we need to have more cooperation among like-minded countries. And that means that for the Philippines and for India, both of them are like-minded countries. But then we also have to accept here that even though it's for deterrence, even though it's there to defend in case of a war, there are shared concerns with respect to China, both for India as well as for the Philippines. So I think, of course, we don't have to see that there is any provocation, but perhaps in case of any eventuality, perhaps we should just have to see it as a way of preparation. And both the countries are coming together to perhaps make the region more peaceful and stable.
So a clear message there from both India and the Philippines. Roger, what's your interpretation of, we had the sound bites at the beginning of the show, Modi's friends by choice, partners by destiny. I mean, Renato had touched on some of the, India is a nuclear power. It's the most powerful of those other 4 nations. It has a huge population.
Well, I think if we trace back the development of the relationship between the Philippines and India, it is very interesting because, well, although India has announced its Look East policy since 1991, the Philippines actually is the farthest country among the ASEAN countries. Updated to Act East in 2014 by Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister. But if we consider this, actually, India in the recent years has been trying to reach out to the Philippines after all those tries to the more neighbor countries. And just like Sana has said, I would like to echo that partners by destiny actually means that India and the Philippines are facing the similar geopolitical challenges, which is China. The rising China need a counterbalance. And for the Philippines, India actually is a good candidate because, well, India is large enough to counter China in the region. Secondly, India has been more active and assertive of its presence in the South China Sea by sending out different destroyers and naval forces to there.
In terms of, Roger, in terms of the message, just want to unpack that a little bit more. Does it go as far as India saying that it believes now the South China Sea or Southeast Asia's security also impacts its own, that it is in the international security interests of India itself?
Yeah, South China Sea actually connects India and other Look East partners, such as South Korea, such as Japan, such as Taiwan and other countries. So a large chunk of maritime trade of India goes through South China Sea as well as Taiwan Strait. So India has to declare its presence over there. So of course, South China Sea has a significant strategic interest for India. And that actually has been confirmed by the former Foreign Secretary, Vijay Gokhale.
Sana, two sides also discussed joint development of submarine infrastructure. What do we know about that? It wasn't in the joint statement. Was it about bases alone, or could it involve co-production?
I think the negotiations have been on for some time, at least for a couple of months now, so it hasn't really been finalized. There's no formal agreement, so that's why it was not mentioned. But I think one thing we need to be very certain and sure about, even if we look at the deliverables and the joint statement, much of the focus of the visit was on furthering defense partnership, defense cooperation. Brahmos, of course, he already mentioned that there are talks about procuring more of Brahmos. But then about naval base, Philippines doesn't really have its own submarine system. and India has its own indigenous submarines as well. So I think one of the benefits, if this comes through, would be that there would be facilities for docking, maintenance, crew training, as well as logistics.
In the analysis, there's come up with this theme of that it's low cost for India if they were to construct bases, but high value. Why is that? Why would a foothold in the Philippines benefit India?
I think it's also going to give India access to if it has to go further east, and then if there is any contingency, so submarine capable naval base, especially if it's in the Philippines, is going to extend India's presence. So it's just not about South China Sea, it's also about broader Indian Ocean region. So how do you counter Chinese naval presence? As in, I think whatever we are seeing today right now, the rapprochement between India and China, it's of course, it's a part of the process, but the fundamental threats are very much going to be there. And I don't think that any country, including Philippines or India, they have lost this idea that they have to prepare their defenses and they have to fight this common concern that is China.
Renato, what do we know from the Philippines side? What do we know about this? And why are submarines and the associated infrastructure so important for the Philippines?
This began, of course, even earlier than President Marcos, during the time of former President Rodrigo Duterte, when he told the Philippine Navy, I want you to have submarines. Initially, of course, the Philippine Navy were looking at Russian-made Kilo-class submarine, but Uncle Sam was not very happy about it. Even Japan was not very happy. Then initially looking at South Korean, then initially Japanese. But now India is offering an option, a submarine. Again, if submarine will be on the table, that will not only enhance the Philippines' anti-access area denial capabilities, it will also enhance sea denial capabilities, building up its naval capability, but not in terms of surface competence or sea control, but on sea denial, which again will be very useful for the Philippines in push comes to shove.
The marine geography of the Philippines makes submarines very important. There's 7,000, is that correct?
100 islands, and of course,
islands as
we
part
have still the former submarine silos of the United States Navy at Subic Bay.
Right.
They're still there.
Right. Perhaps they could be activated at some point. Now, China has typically described Indian-Philippine drills as, quote, disrupting regional peace and stability, while its own military carried out patrols in the South China Sea and, together with Russia, practiced hunting and destroying an enemy submarine in the Sea of Japan as part of broader naval drills involving live firing, anti-submarine ships and aircraft, helicopters, 2 Chinese destroyers and multiple submarines from both countries took part. Meanwhile, also during the Indian-Philippine drill, a series of 5 loud booming explosions were heard from the Philippine island of Palawan. They were later confirmed to have come from a rocket launch in the Chinese province of Hainan. What you see here is a visible condensation trail consistent with rocket exhaust or propulsion. Renato, staying on you. But this wasn't the first time. So what was different about this?
Well, the fact that the Filipinos heard the sonic boom and they saw the debris falling. It might be an accident, but some Filipino analysts are saying, again, this needs to be proven, that it was actually intended. Basically telling us a signal, you are on the reach of our land-based missiles. So be wary. You're allowing the Americans to bring in the Typhoon, the Nemesis. Basically we have the capability to hit you. And we just showed it to you that our missiles could reach as far as the westernmost part of the Philippines, and that's Palawan.
So you do see it as essentially a form of grey zone warfare?
Yeah, I would call a two-edged signal. On the one hand, they could say, "Oh, it's an accident," but on the other hand, it's also a warning.
Because it's very similar to what Admiral Samuel Paparo, the U.S. Indo-PACOM commander, has said, is that Chinese exercises, drills around Taiwan are actually rehearsals and that they could switch to war at any point.
Yes, because in the past we have received that threats. You have the sister of the president, who's a Senator Amy Marcos, who said he was told by the PLA that we are already on the target list of its missile system. So this will basically confirm what if the warning was indeed true, then they're sending us a message. See, we have the capability to do so.
Roger, so we saw there that China was quick to criticize both Marcos's trip and the Indian-Philippine drills. of its own drills. Of course, it said that they were purely defensive, and Marcos has been clear that any of his moves in terms of security are in reaction to the challenges that he faces. Now, given neither the US nor a Western ally was involved in these drills, did you detect that Beijing's propaganda was different this time?
Well, I think, if you ask Beijing about South China Sea, they will say that everything within the 9-dash line actually belongs to China. And although they have been changing their versions of naming the area, but all in all, they believe that this place actually is under their effective jurisdiction. So any third power, quote unquote, that try to interfere and enter this area will be pushed out, and you will see Beijing keep insisting that all the affairs between China, around South China Sea, along with other countries are actually bilateral events, and that should only be solved between China and the other party, but which is not right, because actually South China Sea is an international water, so the free rights of navigation actually has to be preserved, and all the great powers, including India, the United States, Japan, and all other countries should have the right to sail through these waters.
And how about the usual trope, which is that the Philippines doesn't have agency and it is, basically working for the US? How did that work this time? Maybe I should ask Renato.
Well, also showing to China, we're not simply dependent on our alliance with the United States. We have security partners. We have security partners that are, of course, inside the region, that are capable and willing to provide us assistance. And that is, of course, you have Japan, you have South Korea, you have Vietnam, and of course, right now you have India. So again, it's a matter, as Prime Minister Modi emphasized, it's a matter of choice. It's not a matter of necessity. Of course, alliance is a matter of necessity, but our security partnership with India, as again, quoting Prime Minister Modi, it's a matter of friendship by choice, partnership in terms of destiny, not simply in terms of necessity.
Yeah, a sovereign choice of both the Philippines and India. Sana, so on that theme, to what extent are India and Philippines hedging, could we say, against the US? India has been hit with 50% tariffs.
I think there are 2 points about it. First, that I don't think that anything about this trip was anything to do with Trump, because there is a lot of bilateral engagement, respectively, that's happening from both India and Philippines side. So I do not really see that there is any hedging or there is any collaboration that is happening on the tariff front. But I think second part is that I would like to emphasize that, as President Marcos also said, that the disruptions and the tariff are actually telling us that we have to be self-reliant. We have to cooperate among the regional countries. But I think what both Philippines and India, they're trying to do is to perhaps lower down the tariff and also perhaps to manage the crisis. And the idea is perhaps to get the relationship with the US back on track. At least from the Indian side, that is the purpose. So I don't really see that as aimed at the US at all. US is also still considered a very important strategic partner for both the Philippines as well as India. So even though I feel the domestic perception about the US has changed in India, but the government is very much on the same track, that US is a strategic partner.
What do you make of, this is very strategic, it's very clever, because we've got two countries, or the Philippines building ties with an Indo-Pacific power that is not a US treaty ally. How significant is that?
I think we have to see it in its own individual terms, because India has been an important partner for countries such as Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, and Vietnam, and of course Singapore. So I don't think that, in fact, if we go back to the Indo-Pacific revival, it was Trump's idea. Trump was the one who revived the Indo-Pacific and even the quadrilateral dialogue. And there were a lot of countries such as Taiwan and the Philippines who were actually looking towards Quad to become a greater security apparatus within the region. So in fact, that was the entire idea, that we as like-minded countries have to come together. And of course, there is also this idea that not all the time the US will be there. Of course, we need US presence in the region. There is no doubt about that. But if US is unable to do it at some point, how do we step up and how do we, as like-minded countries, come together and work towards addressing the shared concern?
Roger, on the topic of Quad, it is interesting because India traditionally has had security relationships with Australia and Japan, of course, as well with the US. now the Philippines, this is quite a different, reaching beyond Quad itself. What does it say about Quad? Has Quad changed under Trump 2.0?
Well, I think it's yet to be seen because Trump's tariff war actually has just begun. So the impact is yet to be felt. But I think India is doing the right thing by approaching the Philippines, because now India needs to balance between Vietnam and the Philippines, because now Vietnam, known to have its own bamboo diplomacy, now switched to China a little bit. So now India has to, by approaching the Philippines, have to gain something out of that. And I think India is trying to revive its multilateral military exercise institutions in this region, including the ASEAN-Indian maritime exercise, the Milan exercise, and all these bilateral and multilateral things, which is especially important, especially when Donald Trump has been taking unilateral moves, where India will be a stabilizing power in that region by sticking to the idea of multilateralism, which is very important.
Renato, what is it about India and the Philippines coming together? I mean, India perhaps joining the Philippines' maritime cooperative activities in the South China Sea, as well as Roger had said, in exercise Milan. You know, essentially, we see the bringing together, the joining of the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, beyond Quad.
So, at least from the perspective of the Philippines, we have always been accommodating Quad. Of course, among the three members of Quad, they're U.S. treaty allies. India is, of course, not a treaty ally of the United States. But by engaging India, establishing a strategic partnership, so again, the Philippines is showing we have, of course, a very cordial, warm relations with Quad. And of course, although Quad was revived during the Trump administration, Quad was actually convened in both instances in Manila. The first one in 2007, then again in 2017. So this is also in a way symbolic. Quad was formed in the Philippines, and now, of course, we have a security partnership, that different levels of security partnerships with all members of Quad. And this is also significant in terms also with Taiwan. Because I just attended a conference, two-day conference in Jakarta. It was organized by the Observer Research Foundation, and we were talking about, primarily we were talking about South China Sea. But then I told my Indian colleagues, what about Taiwan? So they started thinking. They said, you haven't factored in Taiwan. When I told them, from the perspective of the Philippines, and this was also emphasized by President Marcos in its interview, we're already factoring the importance of Taiwan. So it's not just a matter of the South China Sea, it's also trying to bring in the Quad, not only in the South China Sea, but also in terms of Taiwan.
Okay, let's move to the final question. Modi invited Marcos to India to celebrate 75 years of official ties and the upgrade of the relationship to a strategic partnership. Both leaders spoke of their intertwined histories rooted in centuries-old cultural, trade and civilizational ties. Watch.
The Philippines archipelago was touched by the Indosphere. This influence was of the intangible kind, ideas that seeped into our worldview. A Maranao version of the Ramayana called the Maharaja Lawana, and Sanskrit-derived words that to this day roll off Filipino tongues. Philippines and India, at the very infancy of our statehoods, became two of only 3 Asian nations in San Francisco that labored to establish the United Nations. This journey and vision imbued the pivotal conferences in New Delhi in 1947 and Baguio in 1950 to forge our Pan-Asian solidarity. And 5 years later, we converged in Bandung to define the rallying creed of the Global South.
Sana, how important is this shared history from the early centuries, through to colonial, anti-colonial, post-independence movement for the two countries' relationship today and in the future?
I think it does play an important role because, as I already mentioned, that India has been seen as an important friend, partner. There's no historical baggage. And of course, it has helped in forming what we have today, the present, and it's definitely going to be a partnership or friendship in times to come. But also I want to add something that Philippines has the willingness to defend its territory no matter what it takes, and India has the capability. So when these two countries come together, this is a scenario perhaps where China is the most worried about. So I feel that this is something that is the defining feature of this partnership, and I call it a defining partnership of the Indo-Pacific.
Roger, I'll give you the final notes. I mean, it was Modi that said, that this was a partnership or a friendship for the future.
Well, I think for India to play a leading role in the South-South relationship is especially important, especially amid the rising of China, because we cannot let China to take over the South by itself. And India will be a very important counterweight and provide a different solution to the South countries like the Philippines, like the countries in ASEAN, like the countries in the African countries. And that is especially important.
Okay, we'll have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Renato, Sana, and Roger, for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.